Today was inspired by Les. Almost 2 months ago, he shared his testimony. And I thought, what a great man who's been in this church. This church has been here 100 years, but he's been a rock here. And I thought how his testimony and my testimony are totally different. Just like yours is different to mine and different to Les's. All our testimonies are very individual. And then there is our testimonies where we overlap, where I get to know Les and get to know Lynn, and then we get to know each other and our testimonies, and then all of a sudden people come into our lives and we get to know other people, and then they become part of our testimonies. God is a one of testimonies of interlinking. Today I'm going to be sharing my testimony, but it's more about how Ivy Peak and her testimony interlinks with mine. You see, Ivy is my mother-in-law, and she's been a part of this church for as long. And she's now in a nursing home. But the most beautiful thing today is that it's her 90th birthday today. So I think, what a fitting day to do a presentation for her. Father, I lift this day to you. This mighty woman and your mighty Lord, who has been sovereign over all of our testimonies here today. I give you the praise that you deserve. In Jesus' name. So, this is going to be good. Has everybody got their seatbelts on? We're going to be going on a journey. My testimony. My name is John. I was born on the 7th of August 1960 in Hornsby Hospital. I spent the first 12 months of my life in West Pennant Hills, which actually was just walking distance where Ivy would live most of her life. 1 year later, we then moved to Kempsey, and we lived there for a year, and our younger sister came along. Mum was only 21 when I was born, Dad was 22. We had nothing to do with God. We then moved to Goulburn for a year. We lived down there, and then when I was almost 4, we moved to Lower Mangrove, which is drive down the road, cross over the ferry, turn right, and go about 20 odd, 30 odd k's. That's where I lived. Very isolated, a beautiful place for a 4-year-old to arrive. Chickens, dogs, cows, a dairy, a farm. Imagine Wiseman's Ferry. That's where I had the mountain, the river in the background, an old homestead on the 40 acres up in the corner, big veranda, looking out across, tractor, shed to go and play in. It was very isolated. There was nobody else around. No other children, nobody else except my younger sister. We did not have phone, we did not have radio. We had an old cranky thing on the wall with that. We didn't have electricity when we moved. There was no radio, there was no TV, nothing. At the age of 4, it was decided that I wouldn't go to school, that Mum and Dad decided I would do correspondence for kindergarten and first class. The brown envelope would turn up in the letterbox and I'd go and do my homework. Finally, year 2, I got to go to this lovely little tiny country school, probably similar vintage to this, yellow cream, green roof, veranda along the front. My desk was one of those timber desks that you lift up with the inkwells and the curly bits on the side and the flip up back. I remember every detail of this beautiful building. But over the next 12 months, doing second class, I became a very naughty boy. I was often on detention. I wasn't doing my homework. I was a bad boy. So much so that by the end of third class, they said, there's something wrong with this kid. Today you whacked me on Ritalin. But back then they didn't have that. So they said, you're going to repeat. You're not socialising. There's something seriously wrong with this kid. I remember they then said, oh, and by the way, he's too young. But I remember there was one other boy in my class who was younger and he didn't repeat. So I thought there must be something wrong with me. Halfway through my second attempt at third class, still on detention, still not doing my homework, we moved to Sydney to live with my grandmother in Beecroft. She was failing in health. We moved in, and I remember she tried to reach out to me, but I bit her. I was not nice. I was an angry kid at this stage. She did everything to reach out to me. I remember she taught me to do tapestry. She taught me about coins. But I never was nice to her. She was in a lot of pain. And then when I was 15, she died. And I remember that. It was so sad, because I thought, I really liked you, but I couldn't love you back. To show what sort of guy I was, when I was 11, I was in 5th class. I was taken to the doctor and they said, there's something wrong with you. You can't breathe. You've got asthma. Do not smoke. It will make you very sick. You will die. So a kid like me goes out and buys a packet of Rothmans with 10 in it. I go straight over the road. The next day I smoke the whole lot. I didn't die. I stayed alive. I win. By the time I got to the end of year 10, I failed. I fell out of school. By the time I got to 18, I'm now doing so much drugs and so much alcohol that at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for my 18th birthday, I didn't even make it to the party. I was under one of those concrete laundry tubs underneath the house in my pool of vomit. And they had a great party without me. I remember when I was 13, my cousins took me to Luna Park. That was the first time I tried drugs. In the park, out the front of Luna Park, they gave me a joint that was so loaded. Those rides were amazing that night. They were wild, and I learned something that was really nice. I could get out of this world. I remember when I got to 21, I was now at Metcape. I'm living in a house in Glebe that was the colour of a pumpkin. Everyone was in their late 20s. My 21st, I received bongs and drugs. I remember thinking that if there are drugs here tonight, if heroin is here, I'm going to take it. That's where I was. I remember many years later at a party, a Christian party, and one of the guys said, you know what, when I was 17, I went to a party once and I got a little bit drunk. And I thought, yeah, I remember when I was 17, I went to a party once and I got a little bit sober. That was what I was like. However, at this point, Ivy had come into my life. And she thought, this is not probably the guy that I want to give to my most valuable daughter. I know Ivy. She would have got on her knees and started praying, because that's the sort of woman she was. She saw me and she prayed. So much so that when I got to 25, I made 3 big decisions. I started my business, I got married, and Ivy took me to church, and I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Saviour. And my life changed. Completely changed. Over the next 25 years, so many good things happened. My business grew. We had a perfect life. So much so that when I got to 50, I had everything a man could want. I wonder what would have happened if Ivy had not come into my life all those years ago, where I would have been. So why, on the 9th of December 2010, was I having both hands hanging onto a railing that was so hot you couldn't touch it, but I liked that. And I lifted one leg up onto the railing. It was a railway overpass. My left leg was off the ground, and I'm ready to roll off because there's a freight train coming. Why was I doing that? Now let me share the testimony that I don't want to share. This one is the one that we all have on the inside, the different one. My name is John. I was born on the 7th of August 1960 in Hornsby Hospital. We moved up and down the coast. We eventually finished up on a little tiny farm in Lower Mangrove. It was very isolated, But I eventually started school at second class. The first day I'm sitting there, and I was stabbed in the back. A kid behind me, I turned and I saw one of those wooden rulers with the red writing on it, and he started threatening me of what he was going to do. I became so frightened. Later that week, as I went out onto the veranda of this beautiful little school, I looked along and he was up on a bench doing something on the window, and I thought, what are you doing? And as I approached, he picked up all the dried blowflies and jumped down and shoved them in my mouth and laughed. He thought that was fun. Over the next months, I remember another thing that happened. It was the milk crate with all the milk bottles in it and the little silver lids. And as I went to go and get it, he said, that's not yours, that one is. So I picked it up and he peeled the lid off and took a mouthful. And the milk had been sat somewhere for weeks. And I started vomiting. I remember that clearly. The other boys all started laughing. But then it got to a whole new level because that beautiful little building got smashed and they built this big red thing behind it, red brick, and it had a basement. And he would take me underneath there with the other boys and they used me. That went on for a couple of years. I was always on detention, but that was okay because I knew that if I went into the toilets, what would happen? So I would sit on the front veranda because of what was going on in those toilets. It was much better to do a detention. I remember sitting in the yard once and my pain in my stomach was so bad I could not move. I was about 8. And this girl came over and said, what's wrong? And I said, I can't move. And all I could think was, I'm going to have to undo the buttons, and they're going to have to, and I'm just not going to go there. Later that day, I was taken to hospital for a hernia, but it was up here, most probably from vomiting, from the things that happened. It became the way I handled most of my life. Don't tell anybody. Stay behind the pain. Don't tell anybody. On the perfect farm, all I ever did was I would live under the veranda. I spoke to my dad just recently and I said to him, do you remember, this was only earlier this year, just finding out information, Dad, what did I do on the farm? Did I go under the veranda? And he said, yes, you lived under there. I remember once it was pouring with rain and you came out covered in mud. I wrote this, I'll just quickly read this, but this is what I wrote a few years ago. When I'd lie under the veranda there, this is the type of kid I was. This is the one that was behind this one. When I'd sit under the veranda, there were boards, and the light would come down through these boards onto the ground. I could see these lines. Some of the cracks you could make out where they lined up. Don't speak to me, I pretend not to hear. I'm hiding under the veranda, don't come near. When I'm 10, come back then, I'll know what to say, I'll be a man by then. Handfuls of dirt I rub on my skin. It's to match those feelings that I'm holding within. And the sunlight draws these lines on the ground, perfectly placed using the floorboards they found from above. Sometimes they fade when the clouds move above. How slowly they move, can they give me love? Please leave me alone, don't come near. I'll come out soon, but I'll live in fear. Just give me some time. I know that you're near. Give me some time. I need to wipe this last tear. When I got into smoking, I found that was great. They said I'd die, but the pain was gone when I had that. I found that when I was going to sleep, I would often hit myself. I found that if I had a cigarette, I could open the window and I'd hang out the window when Mum and Dad at 11 and 12, and I could have a cigarette because that destroyed the pain. When I got to 18 and 21, I found ways of burying my pain in the drugs. They worked. They were so good because I could get out there. But Ivy had come into my life and I made 3 major decisions. 1, I started my business. 2, Kate and I got married. Number 3, Ivy took me to church, but she didn't take me to a normal church because she was in prayer of who to take me to. She took me to an ex-Hells Angel bikie woman. She was an amazing lady. She was an unforgivable. And I saw her sitting there and no one knew about this testimony at that stage. And I watched her and I thought, you've changed. I want what you've got. Ivy took me to the right person. The thing is, it was only that guy that accepted Jesus Christ, not this one. I stayed behind that one. I became what the world called double-minded. I lived this life while presenting that one. And over the next 25 years, the gap between what people thought I was and who I was grew and grew to the point where all I wanted to do was die. Because I had done some things that were horrible in life. I had sinned. So I decided to commit suicide. As I'm climbing up onto the railing and ready to roll over, this is what you're thinking. This is where I was. I didn't want to fall in front of the train because that was two deaths. That was bump and then the train. I didn't want to land on the roof because I might bounce off and live. This is weird thinking, but this is where you're at. I wanted to go between the carriages. I had a note in my pocket that had all my sin written on it, so that when they found my body, they knew what a horrible man this was, because I'm an unforgivable. I tried to kill that person over there, but it didn't work. I climbed off the railing because the train driver watched me all the way as he went underneath, and I saw him look up at me, and it broke my concentration. I climbed off the railing, I walked down the hill, and I walked across the main road just with blinkers on. Boom, 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 boom. Cars swerved, horns beeped, no one hit me. I can't even die right. So the next day, I took that piece of paper and I walked into a police station and I handed it to them. And I'd added at the top, I don't want to solicit a present, and at the bottom I said, whatever anybody says about this, their story will be used in the court of law, not mine. And I destroyed Ivy's life and everybody else's life. And all of a sudden, her testimony became many of your testimonies, where you all started praying with her because of this man and what he'd done. And here am I here today. You see, that piece of paper had every sin on my life, and I started 6.5 years in prison. Ivy was back on her knees again, praying. She should not have done that. That's not the role of a mother-in-law. They are to say, get out of here. But she was praying for me. She wasn't telling me how to live. She was praying for me. God took everything. This man no longer existed. Only this man, the man that I'd lived with all my life, the one behind the wall. That's all I had left. But Ivy did not reject me. She started praying. She didn't start hating. Suddenly, everyone met this man, and I was now walking two justice systems. Man's justice system and God's justice system. These two people were walking the same path before a judge with a set of laws. I actually think that hell on earth is when your heart says that's a sin and your flesh keeps doing it over and over and over and you can't stop it. That's hell on earth. That's where I was. What makes an unforgivable man? What makes him unforgivable? I'll tell you two quick stories of two guys I met in prison. Both of them, their name was John. What is that about? The first one, we called him Mouse. He had a tattoo of a mouse on his arm. He got a woman, he drugged her, took her home, had his way, and went to prison. He got out of prison. He then took a woman to a club, drugged her, took her home, had his way, and now was in prison, and now was my cellmate. Unforgivable man. What a horrible man. That man would be the sort of guy you would have on the news. Yet over a month or two, when you're sitting in a cell with them, you get to know them. And he shared this man with me. He said how when he was a boy, all he had was his mother. nothing else. She was a prostitute with a serious drug problem. They couch surfed, sometimes on the street. Sometimes he would lie in the room and hear her mum at work. And sometimes, for extra money, they made him involved. At age 10, he helped his mother as she died from a drug overdose. Unforgivable man. We should never forgive him. Then there was another guy. He took advantage of a lady with her children there, killed the children, then killed him. Unforgivable man. Cold as ice, no remorse. Evil man. We should put him away forever. When I got to meet him and I sat with him, I ran Bible studies and he was involved in those Bible studies many times with me. And one day he shared with me how he grew up on the wall at King's Cross as a boy prostitute. That's where he learned to become cold as ice. But when he was 40, he met Jesus in prison. And he completely changed. So much so that I watched him lead people to Christ so many times. And he knew he could never be forgiven on this side. He knew he could never be released. He was never to be released. And he died in prison just recently. This man, he knew he couldn't be forgiven either. But he met Jesus. That's what changed him. I really wonder what actually happened to the woman at the well. Slept around, unforgivable. What happened to her growing up? The man behind the tombs, what happened to him? His family probably lived in the town down the road. Mum and dad lived there, the brothers and sisters. But he's an unforgivable. He's a chaining. He sat there punching himself, hating himself, and that's where he was. The woman at Simon's dinner party, crying at his feet. Everyone's looking at her. She knows she's an unforgivable. What happened to her? What happened to these people? We don't know their backstory. We just know them in the Bible as the unforgivables. But what happened to each of them? They all met Jesus. They all met Jesus. Jesus didn't try to fix this person. He fixed this person. 4 points for today. Just 4 quick points about today. About these two people in our life. The first one. This one is a material world. This one can be a victim mentality. This one we can live in life where we can get more money in our bank account and look good. We can have a happy life. We can have our gammy leg healed. We could have a new car given to us. All of them, I could say, look what God did. And it's so good. But also this side can sin and do bad things and we get into trouble. This side is a spiritual journey. This one is the one on the inside. This one is a different journey. As you walk this one, God can bless you by helping you forgive somebody, because these are spiritual problems. And on this side, you can sin. Both sides are the same. However, number 2, this means that you're now walking 2 justice systems at the same time. Man's justice system and God's justice system. Man's justice system, I fear the police. I fear the authorities on this side. Rightly so, because I'm an unforgivable on that side. Interesting how the police work. I remember I had my photos on my side beside my bed in prison, where I had all my family, including Ivy. And once every 6 months or so, they come in and smash your cell, looking for contraband. And if they don't like you, see, I had a position in prison where I was actually the number 1 clerk to the guy who had the 3 pepper. I'd been given this position to introduce, where people came into prison, over 500 inmates, and I would place them into their jobs. God gave me favour in there because Ivy was praying, because my family were praying. because you guys were praying. I had incredible favour. And a number of the officers, one of them was the head of the union in there, and he hated that he couldn't move inmates around, but I could. So he smashed my cell. He took all the photos off the wall and put them in the toilet. That's the sort of thing that happens. But on this side, I have now learnt to fear and tremble God, because he is all-powerful. He is so powerful in my life that fear and trembling this, he's actually over that. He is over the government. He is in charge of that. So anything that happened over here, if the court started going south, if things started going wrong in my court case, I could say, Father, I hand it to you. And you know what? It didn't always work out well. Sometimes God needed to hit me on the back of the head with a lumber 4x2, and he would use this system to do it. That was fine. But on this side, I fear and tremble God. It's like, oh, you are so powerful. So powerful. Alex last week preached on the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the comforter. On this side, we've all felt the comforter when we've had a miracle happen on earth. When something has happened, it's been the most amazing. God comforted me with a new car. I got the job that I wanted. They are great comforts, and they are from God. Don't get me wrong. They are from God. When God blesses you and he opens up a door, it's fantastic. On this side, you're walking God's justice system. It's a set of laws that haven't changed. This side is a set of laws that Satan keeps changing. Oh, no, hang on, we can have two men live together. We can actually, as Jennifer said, we can now allow these children unborn to die. We can change the rules. That way then we can feel as though we're actually sin-free. It's a fake sin-free. If we can twist the rules a little bit, we can be sin-free. And then we can have this interesting thought on this side where, well, maybe I'm sin-free enough to actually go over into that courtroom, but I'm sorry, you will never be sin-free on this side because none of us can do it. Not even me. None of us can. We are, on this side, many of you will never be a criminal on that side and unforgiven, thankfully. But all of us on this side have done things in our life where we know that we can turn up and say, God, I don't know what to do. I think I've messed up. And nobody else knows about it. They only know this one. But this one over here, we struggle with. But I have some awesome news. Because on this side, when I walked into the police station and I said, you need to arrest me, the judge took that piece of paper and said, you're an unforgivable. Go to hell for 6.5 years. And the world agreed. I actually didn't agree. I think it should have been 65 years. When I handed that, I knew I'd done the wrong thing. I was guilty and I confessed my sin. And I did the punishment. But on this side, on that same day, when I committed suicide, when I killed myself, when I handed that over and I gave up and I surrendered with my hands like this, when I handed that piece of paper to God, the judge, just before he took it, someone grabbed it. All my crimes that were written down there, and he said, Father, I will take the punishment for those crimes. I will go to hell for John. Nobody would do it on this side. Nobody should do it on this side. But on this side, somebody took the piece of paper. How can you not fall in love with Jesus? That's what we can all do. That one on the inside. That piece of paper, when we hand it over, it is the most beautiful feeling. Yep, I really wonder what would have happened in my life if Ivy didn't come into it. Where I'd be today. Where would I be today? Where would each of us be for the one person who was praying for each and every one of us? We've all had people praying for us. We've all had Ivies in our life. Ivy would have had people praying for her. Because all our testimonies all dovetail together. Our testimonies of what God has done in our life. Mine is fairly... I'm now starting to realise that all that junk that happened, I can now, yesterday, sitting with a guy who's going through some tough times, his marriage falling apart, he's in his 30s, and I'm sitting there thinking, Lord, he's got a very similar background to mine. But because God has washed mine clean, I don't have to forget it. I know it's there. I can't control or turn it delete. We all would love to do that with our mind, but we can't. But now, God is now allowing me to share my testimony like you do in your families and pray for people. That's what I love today.